You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button on our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for the week of January 19th, 2024. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where it's been run out and buy milk and bread and scotch weather all week for several weeks. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
Today's like our relief day in terms of weather, where it's 30 or 33.
Yeah.
All the snow melted in the backyard all
Very
of a sudden.
Exciting.
And tomorrow it'll be below zero again.
The little weather pop-up on my screen here is obviously it has me somewhere other than where we live, because it will say it's 35 degrees and partly sunny, and then it'll say high pollen count, which I know can't be right because I know what pollen is.
That's impossible in this cold. Yeah. There is no pollen. I wonder what's wrong with my computer. Anyway, I hope this suffering through this below zero means less mosquitoes next summer. That's what they promise us, but we'll see.
They promise us
They say
everything.
that. They would, yes.
Joe Biden will promise you anything.
We have something wonderful to celebrate besides a lack of mosquitoes.
We do.
Yeah, you want to talk about it?
Yeah. Through the grace of God and the Inside Straight, it's. I like to thank Donald Trump. I like to thank Nikki Haley, and I like to thank Ron DeSantis, because the debate has been canceled. The New Hampshire prep debate is canceled. So that means no debate prep for me. I don't have to watch the goddamn debates, which is great, which is awesome, which will spare my stomach lining, allow me to sleep well at night, and really hearty thank you, Ron DeSantis, for being such an enormous dick, and Nikki Haley for putting him on the back burner and saying he's not even worth your time.
You're invisible now. Exactly.
Just saved me all kinds of stuff. So
still, it's another terrible, terrible disappointment for New Hampshire.
Yeah, well, New Hampshire can...
And I get it. I get that New Hampshire is mad at the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah.
We, as the Democratic Party, and of course I speak for the Democratic Party through all time, space, and dimensions.
Sure.
We took a thing of value away from them.
We did.
But as I said at Crooks and Liars, Democrats cannot in any way justify initially filtering their candidates through these two tiny little all-white states.
Uh-huh.
That have Iowa and New Hampshire have a total of 10 electoral votes. And I don't like the Electoral College. I think we should be counting everybody's vote as an individual vote. Mm-hmm. But this is the system we have right now. And two tiny states that are majority white in a huge way.
Yeah.
Is just not the face of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Also, hat tip to my TV husband, Elie Mystal, for noting the Caucasian Caucus in Iowa, and how sloppily votes were handled in the Iowa caucuses, because, hey, it's just us white folks. We don't have to worry about, somebody dropping in too many or voter fraud. We can just drop everything in a Ziploc bag.
Yeah. Oh, it was handing around garbage bags and Hy-Vee paper bags and buckets, just dropping them in, counting them however much, it's...
And if you missed that, Chris Hayes had a very good segment on that this week. You can find it on YouTube, I'm sure. Driftglass did a little bit of research into Iowa this week as well.
I did some math, and I'm proud of it. I showed my work, which you should do to get extra points. Speaking of tiny white states, two of my siblings were born in Iowa. I spent a lovely weekend there with my siblings in Burlington, Iowa, which is a beautiful town on the river. We had a great time.
Yeah, just last year, right?
Yeah, just this last summer. And we had a great time. We had a great house, and people there were awesome, and so forth. That being said, Iowa has no business being a first in the nation primary at all, period. But you can understand why when you compare and contrast two sets of numbers. Now, as I told you earlier, Blue Gal, filth is my life, filth is my politics. Nah.
If you think I'm going to cut a clip of Divine,
no,
instead of a clip of Youngest Child saying that, because
that's her thing now.
Youngest Child saying that's the thing.
That's hilarious, but
it is hilarious. Youngest Child will just pop into a conversation and say, "Condone mass murder. Filth is my life. Filth is my politics. Filth is my life. Take whatever you like. And it's divine from Pink Flamingos.
Yeah. And it's, as stepdad, it's unnerving, but, I roll with it and go, this is, hey, I'm sure I was quoting.
She does it to get a laugh and a rise, and it works.
It does. So. It works great. And I'm sure I was quoting Shakespeare to my parents.
When you were 20.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. That's what I was doing. But this is workforce development is my life and is my politics. As you know, I spent a lot of time in workforce development professionally. And so I thought it'd be interesting to compare and contrast two sets of numbers. How much was spent by Republican presidential candidates in Iowa versus the entire federal allocation for workforce development for the state of Iowa in 2023. All right, couple of acronyms. Well, there's one acronym you should know about, which is WIOA, WIOA. It used to be WIA, WIA. That's what it was back when I was in the business. But it's the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. That's how the federal government funnels money to states. That's the mechanism. That's the instrument it uses to put money in states. Every state gets a grant of some kind or several grants of some kind. And they break down as follows. There's a youth grant, an adult grant, a dislocated worker grant. There's something called Wagner-Peiser, which is a separate issue altogether. So here are the numbers. For the state of Iowa, the federal government gave Iowa, by formula, for the youth activities for 2023, about $5.5 million, a little bit over that. For adult activities, $4 million and change. Those are adults who are looking for work, who need help with a resume, who need training, whatever they need. They need to find work. And dislocated workers, which are laid off workers, people who've been laid off from their work, have to get back in the workforce, desperately need of retraining, maybe an internship, maybe transportation money, maybe equipment, etc. $4 million and change. The Wagner-Peiser Act people got $6 million, which is nice. And the workforce information grants to states, which I think is IT stuff to do support work, about $450,000. So that's
now
it.
This is done by population, right?
Yes.
So
Illinois gets a
larger population would get more money. And is it based on the number of unemployed in the state, or is it just a flat grant?
It's a formula grant. So there's a big chunk of federal money that's broken up by state, but you do get some flexible money in there. To do flexible things, but it's. I
think that junior dude has gotten some help from Washington State with some of that money.
Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure there's a.
As an adult with autism, they are helping him with placement and job and resume and all that kind of thing. I'm sure that some of that money's going from.
When you come to Illinois, there's a workforce center. I don't know, 2.5 miles from our house, 3 miles from our house, on 9th Street. It's called WorkNet, and I know that because I was on the committee that decided the artwork for WorkNet. I was on the committee that fought the state tooth and nail to get off their corrupt, shitty old system and put us on a new system because the city of Chicago, where I worked, could not use their old system. Physically impossible to use their old system, which was terrible. But the one down by our house here, Blue Gal, covers like 2 or 3 counties.
Right.
Whereas Chicago, just as a city, by the way, the workforce area of Chicago doesn't exist anymore. They let me go, and then they let the whole system go. So it's been rolled into Cook County. Have like 10 workforce centers just for the city. So it really is by population.
And every alderman would like to have a workforce center in their in their area. Right.
Well, and we arranged to have affiliates, people that we co-fund, special projects to try to spread the money around. And it was useful. And this was for everything. This was for people who've been in prison, ex-offenders. This is for women who were in shelters. This is for kids, summer programs, factory shutdowns, you name it. We spent not a fraction of the amount of money necessary to actually serve the people of Illinois, but that's how the money gets spent at the federal level. That's the pipeline that reaches the states from the Fed. So you got all that?
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
Now, spending in support of Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis in Iowa and the caucuses exceeded $70 million combined. That's more than half of the total of $123 million in ads spent on all GOP candidates as of January 12th. Here are those numbers. Pro-Haley ads, $37 million. Pro-DeSantis ads, $35 million. Pro-Trump ads, $18 million, because he was going to win anyway. And all the others, everybody else from Ramaswamy to Christie, $33.2 million. All federal spending on workforce development in Iowa, that's youth, adult, dislocated, Wagner-Peiser, discretionary, everything, $20 million in change. The total money spent by Republican candidates just to run in that shitty, unimportant caucus, $123 million, 6 times the amount was blown on that sort of thing. And just, I wanted to bring that up because that's a lot of money coming into Iowa for ads and consultants and stuff that does not go to dislocated workers. It does not go for youth programs or any of that stuff. And B, it's obscene. It's totally obscene that 6 times the amount of money gets spent by these clowns to get through a caucus than is spent on workforce development in Iowa at the federal level. So I just wanted to say that because it's for the
and I
record
mentioned
with that.
last week, the governor of Iowa is turning down summer food programs for kids because she doesn't like spending. So, the obscenity goes on.
Yeah. Well, this is money they get regardless of whether the governor likes it or not.
Right,
It's formula.
And I'm sure she's glad to have it. I'm sure she is.
Sure. There's never enough, but Jesus God,
Yeah.
It's simply ridiculous. And that's, you follow the money. What are your national priorities? And Democrats are going to spend a shit ton of money too. It's not the amount of money that gets spent on campaigns. That is indeed obscene. Democrats have to spend at least that much just to keep up. It's the fact that our priorities are so backwards that running for president costs so much more than helping people who are unemployed or just getting out of prison or living in a shelter find employment and find useful employment where they live. Yeah. That's ridiculous.
Switching gears, Oliver Darcy at Reliable Sources is a really good source honest source for figuring out what's going on in the media. And he made a really good point this week. I'm going to quote from his Reliable Sources column, quote, "There is a dangerous undercurrent dragging Americans who wade into the political waters out toward the extreme. But much of the national press basking ashore on the sun-soaked beach refuses to acknowledge it in a serious manner. Embarrassingly, Ron DeSantis has done more in recent days than most in the press to call attention to what we would call an important media fail."
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "The Florida governor accurately noted last week that Republican voters operate in a dishonest information environment in which Trump receives little criticism but plenty of praise. Of course, the observation from DeSantis, himself a culture warrior who has refrained from assailing Trump in a meaningful way while contributing generously to public distrust of the press, is rich. But that doesn't mean it isn't right on the mark." Unquote. And I would just mention that DeSantis is the pinnacle of hypocrisy, as he only got elected Florida governor by appearing scores of times on Fox, over and over again, multiple times per day on some days. That and joining himself to Trump's hip, with a commercial where he was, spelling Trump with blocks for his toddler.
Yeah, reading him a story
and
about
reading
Donald
him
Trump.
From Art of the Deal. Yes,
right.
Those are the only reasons Ron DeSantis is anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Back to Oliver Darcy, quote, "On a daily basis, cable channels such as Fox News, a stable of national and local talk radio hosts, an assortment of online influencers, and a network of online outlets such as Breitbart dump reams of toxic waste into the national discourse. That is not without consequence. The propaganda machine supporting Trump has deceived the GOP, twisting the party into believing outright lies that have been publicly rebuked by the former president's one-time confidants. But instead of identifying the crux of the matter and vigorously calling it out, most major newsrooms demur when presented with repeated evidence of its corrosive and widespread effects."
Mm-hmm.
And there's really no debating about this.
Well, you'd think so.
Fox settled the Dominion lawsuit for hundreds of millions of dollars. There is ample evidence that their hosts do not believe what they're saying, but it is a defined message designed to reprogram these meat bags. That's what it is.
And now a short clip from an extreme leftward-leaning liberal, super liberal podcast about what it's like to be right all the time. Yes, that was our friends who block me on all social media platforms at the Bulwark complaining that nobody listens to them and they're right all the time and how come people don't listen to them and everyone hates them for being right all the time and isn't it a shame how right we have been since 2016.
Since 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
the irony being that they don't want to hear from anybody who was right before 2016 because that would be really inconvenient. So
Yeah.
this is not a bug. This is a feature. This is one clip from a long podcast that was mostly just Tim Miller and his sidekicks bitching about how nobody appreciates how right they are. But this is a feature of every Never Trump podcast. There's always a segment about them complaining that we were so right about everything, Blue Gal. I'm sick of being right. I just want to be wrong just once. It's hilarious. Now, changing gears yet again, but not really. If you need further proof that both siderism remains the last refuge of the worst people in the world, this from the Wall Street Journal. Quote, both sides threaten democracy. The January 6th riot was a national disgrace, but Biden should push his own party to respect norms. Yeah. And this, it is.
What norms are they talking about? It's just absurd.
Norm Coleman? Norm Ornstein?
Norm Ornstein. They should respect Norm Ornstein. I do.
Norm from Cheers, maybe? I don't know. I really don't know because I don't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal and I don't care what they have to say. But it's just this constant drumbeat of it's always both sides. So why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why are they doing this? Well, we're going to actually talk about that in a little bit. But I want to lead into that by speaking about the New York Times, the editorial board of the New York Times. The editorial board of the New York Times is lecturing to an empty auditorium. Or they're lecturing to only people who agree with them. But the tone they take, the sort of stern, arrogant, fatherly lecturing tone they take, leads me to wonder, who the hell do they think they're talking to? I mean, who do they believe is actually listening to a word they have to say? Because this is an editorial board article or column entitled The Responsibility of Republican Voters. That's right, kids. The editorial board of the New York Times is going to tell Republican voters what they should do and why they should do it. Quote, Republicans who will gather to cast the first votes in the 2024 presidential primary season have one essential responsibility: to nominate a candidate who is fit to serve as president, one who will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Donald Trump, who has proved himself unwilling to do so, is manifestly unworthy, unquote. Wow. Really? He's unworthy of that? Really? Who are you talking to? Then there's a whole long yada, yada, yada about what an awful person he is and the terrible things he does. Quote, again, at this critical moment, it is imperative to remind voters that they still have the opportunity to nominate a different standard bearer for the Republican Party, and all Americans should hope that they do so. This is not a partisan concern. It's good for the country when both parties blah, 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 blah.
Oh, my God.
And the word that I want to call your attention to is remind. That's what the New York Times is doing to Republican voters. I'm here to remind you that you have choices other than Donald Trump because apparently you're too stupid to know that, or you're unaware of it, or you've been asleep. It is this paternalistic, creepy, apparently you don't understand this, Republican voters. There are other Republicans out there you to choose from. There's a lot of fish in the sea. Maybe you don't know about Donald Trump. Here, step into my windowless van and let me tell you about Donald Trump.
We've got candy, too.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, because you don't understand your own party or the voting process. And the person you're going to trust to tell you what to do is clearly the fucking New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more and more yada yada, orange man bad, 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 bad. Quote, Mr. Trump's construction of a cult of personality in which loyalty is the only real requirement has badly damaged the Republican Party and the health of American democracy, unquote. There's more yada yada yada. He's a bad man. Did you know that, Blue Cal? Very bad man. Bad
really?
Guy, bad policies, kind of racist. Not sure we use the word racist, but clearly not a good guy. And sure, while voters might agree with his toxic policies, quote, electing Mr. Trump to 4 more years in the White House is a unique danger, unquote. Because I don't know if you peons know this. We've got this constitution system, and it's really important, and Trump is going to wreck it. So let me sit here and tell you how the Constitution works and why it's important and why Donald Trump's bad for that. Because clearly you don't understand this. And me talking to you in the most patronizing voice imaginable is what's going to win you over to my side. Quote, Mr. Trump's record of contempt for the Constitution and his willingness to corrupt people, systems, and processes to his advantage puts all this at risk, unquote. Because you remember when George H.W. Bush lost gracefully? Wasn't that something? Wasn't that great? Quote, It also means accepting that the power of the victors is limited, unquote. Remember when John McCain disagreed with the Supreme Court, but he said anyway, it is a decision the Supreme Court has made, and now we need to move forward. Wasn't it awesome when he did that? Remember John McCain? Remember George H.W. Bush? Weren't they great? Quote, by contrast, as president, Trump repeatedly attacked the integrity of other government officials, unquote. More yada, 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 orange man bad. Quote, voters inclined to support Mr. Trump as an instrument of certain policy goals might learn from his presidency that changes achieved by lawless machinations can prove ephemeral. And that's where yours truly started laughing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the sentence construction in this paragraph is, voters inclined to support Mr. Trump might learn. I'm dying here. Who the fuck do they think they're talking to? Apparently, the Republican Party is a land of contrast, Blue Gal. And finally, Mr. Trump is now distinguished from the rest of the Republican candidates primarily by his contempt for the rule of law. The sooner he is rejected, the sooner the Republican Party can return to the difficult but necessary task of working within the system to achieve its goals, unquote. Because, yeah, that's going to happen. The minute Trump's gone, man, the GOP is going to snap right back to the way it was back when George H.W. Bush lost to Bill Clinton and graciously left the stage, because that's definitely going to happen. Again, this is not a problem of words. I understand all the words. They didn't misspell a single thing. There were no commas out of place. There were no paragraphs that didn't begin and end correctly. It's a problem of concept. They do not understand who they are talking to or what they are doing, because their entire metaphor, the lens that they use to look at the world, is broken beyond repair. And that is the conversation that I was referring to. This is Rick Perlstein interviewing Jeff Sharlet, recounting an encounter with a New York Times journalist as recommended by Jay Rosen. So you and I, Blue Gal, have hit the trifecta. We are personal friends with Rick Perlstein. We are social media friends with Jeff Sharlet, and Jay Rosen has been on our podcast.
Yeah.
So this is multiple part columns by Rick Perlstein in the American Prospect. I'm not even going to attempt to read it aloud because that doesn't do it justice. But I'm going to recommend that you go over there. We'll put the links in the show notes. But it is this wild encounter between Jeff Sharlet and a New York Times journalist who he does not name. He doesn't want to shame him. But the guy who doesn't believe that Jeff Sharlet's really a journalist until Jeff Sharlet talks, because he's there to talk about his book. And he doesn't believe Sharlet is an actual journalist until Sharlet talks about, getting in the door to talk to someone whose policy is shoot feds, shoot journalists, but you appear to be a fool, so I'll let you in. And that's when the New York Times guy was like, oh, you do real journalism. Oh, okay. But what blew his mind, what blew Rick Perlstein's mind, was how completely fucking arrogantly certain the New York Times reporter was that they do nothing wrong, that everything's right, that the way they do things is correct. They can't use the word fascism, for example, because that would bias people. They'd bring something to the reading that would bias them in favor of one side or another. And this guy is not rich. He doesn't. I'm sure he's not there protecting his stock portfolio, but he comes from a completely corrupt culture.
Yeah.
That says you cannot interpose anything that tells people what the fuck is really going on in the Republican Party, because that sounds biased. And he really does cast himself. I'm not quoting Rick Perlstein exactly, but this is pretty close. The New York Times believes itself to be an unblemished window into reality, that there's no intermediation between them and reality, that whatever you see on the page is what's in the real world. And they're just there to point a lens at it and let you decide.
All the news is fit to print, Driftglass. That's what they are.
And that is so manifestly untrue. And this New York Times journalist got really pissed off when Jeff Sharlet called him out on a whole bunch of things. And ultimately, the New York Times article, the New York Times journalist's justification for all of his arrogant beliefs about the infallibility of the New York Times, that they do everything great and everything's wonderful and they don't need to correct anything, was, well, the marketplace has decided, Jeff. We have 10 million subscribers, so we must be doing something right. And yeah, and how many followers does Tucker Carlson have? Does that mean he's right too?
Yeah. And you did make a very good comment about that during our rehearsal today, that Fox News knows what they're doing. The difference between the New York Times bragging about their subscriber base
Mm-hmm.
and Fox bragging about, well, we have the highest ratings, is Fox knows that they're reprogramming meatbags.
Yeah, that's exactly that's their purpose.
Yeah,
And
that's
the New York Times believes it is a temple of journalism that is perfect in every way and has nothing to
and
change.
hails
nothing
from
to improve.
Rome. I mean,
Yeah.
hails from the center of the universe.
And they are in the business, as we've said on this podcast, I think since, well, for 14 years now, I mean, since day one, is they are the mainstream media, and their job's to tell comforting fairy tales to their readers. That's why their readers are so happy with them, because they tell them what they want to hear. They want to, the Upper West Side rich folks want to hear both sides are bad, both sides are awful. Maybe Mike Bloomberg will make a great president. That's what they want to hear.
But
And that's what the
I'm
New York
just
Times.
wondering, the deeper question of, is that all in the age of the internet? Is that all that news is anymore?
Market
Is telling people what they want to hear and finding a niche and then making money off of it if you can.
Yes. I mean, what we do doesn't make us rich, Blue Cow.
No.
But there is, we believe our mission is, we've said this 1,000 times. I think we have a letter from AJ talking about this.
Yes, we do.
Talking about giving people a vocabulary, giving people a lexicon to understand what's going on around them. Because without some kind of frame of reference, the world just is insane.
It makes
Nothing
no sense.
makes any sense.
I know. Yeah.
And once you understand that there is a conservative media that is dedicated to a propaganda mission, reprogramming 70 million, 60 million, 40 million Americans directly or indirectly to voting Republican and ignoring anyone who tells them anything they don't want to hear. What is not, and that is a known fact. That's reality.
Mm-hmm.
Another reality is, and this is where the failure of the mainstream media is most toxic, is that the mainstream media cannot report on itself. It can't look at itself, because its job is to tell other people different comforting lies. That there are two sides to every story, that both sides are equally bad, that the Wall Street Journal, both sides are a threat to democracy. That Matthew Dowd made a living at this at the ABC News.
The corrupt duopoly. Yeah.
The corrupt duopoly. Everything's the same. Both sides are equally bad. Both sides are corrupt. Anyone attempting to make any distinction between the right and the left is lying to you. And there are at least 10 million people out there subscribing to the New York Times who want to believe that, who desperately want to believe that, because if you tell them the fascists are here, they live next door to you, and you've got to stand up and fight, that scares the shit out of people.
Yeah.
They want to believe
I just can imagine the editorial board sitting around a Zoom call discussing an editorial called The Responsibility of Republican Voters.
Yeah.
And how dangerous this is and how bold we are to do it.
Yes.
And patting themselves on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And I can also imagine them, not that they listen to this podcast, but responding to it of, well, what more do you want? We went out on the very edge of what we are able to do to tell Republican voters not to vote for Trump. And that's not what they did in this editorial.
Absolutely not. It was condescending.
Yep.
It was arrogant. And it was useless. And there's no one on that side.
And there's no understanding of who the Republican base is.
No.
Or who the Trump voter is.
Because they can't. Because if they do, they have to start using the word fascist. And they don't. They will not do that.
Yep.
So you're stuck with them in this temple they built that has enormous power. And so you have on the right an enormously powerful propaganda engine pumping toxic filth into people's brains every day because they won't change the channel. Teaching them not to listen to anybody but them. In the center, you have people like the New York Times pumping equally toxic nonsense into the centrist brain, telling them it's always both sides. It's always both sides. It's always both sides. The centers, the thing. This is why Joe Lieberman and No Labels make sense. You know, this is why Mike Bloomberg might make a good president. Why can't we have a national unity ticket? You know?
Yeah.
And there is nothing on the left equivalent to either of these things. Instead, on the left, you have you and me and a handful of people, and Hal Sparks, by the way, who we're going to be with tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow morning we'll be on the Hal Sparks show.
And that's it. I mean, we have lovely people like Rick Perlstein, and we have Jeff Charlotte, we have Jay Rosen, we have those people. But there is no megaphone, there's no amplification mechanism anywhere like the New York Times has, the mainstream media has, or the right has at all. And there are no people on the left willing to spend the money to make one.
Yeah.
So we're stuck with this. It's just, I tag my blog every time I write a post, which is, once a day now. I am the liberal media because I am the liberal media. So are you.
Yep.
And we're the poorer for it, but we do what we can. And now, a clip from Joanne Reed.
Yeah, I want to play this just because this to me was my don't sugarcoat it and no fair remembering stuff. Because the memory hole of what Ron DeSantis did to his state, and we have family that lives in Florida, what Ron DeSantis did to his state to completely sell it out just to win Iowa, not to win the presidency, but just to win Iowa. And remembering the past is something that Joy Reid, former Floridian, did this week. And here's the clip.
I think we must remark upon the absolute tragedy of Ron DeSantis as a human being and as a politician. And I say this as somebody who spent 14 years in the great state of Florida. This man torched the state of Florida's education system by turning it into a grand apologist for slavery. He passed a 6-week abortion ban that he signed at midnight so that no one could see him do it, to match Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, in essentially condemning rape victims and incest victims to give birth at 10 years old, if that's what it takes, in order to get evangelicals to like him. All the things he did, he completely took the Republican Tallahassee entire Senate and House delegations, put them in his service. They had to essentially work for him, and they passed everything he asked them for one reason only, because he was going to win Iowa. Yeah. He put it all on Iowa. His whole ground game is Iowa. His whole strategy is Iowa. And he destroyed his political career in his home state, neglected his home state during 2 hurricanes, wore weird high boots and humiliated himself when he finally ran home to pretend that he was going to help his state, and neglected it. The highest insurance rates. It's impossible to get insurance in the state. Workers are leaving. His Latino workers, Hispanic workers are leaving because of draconian immigration law that his Republicans passed for him. It's hurting the agriculture industry, the construction industry. He's ruined the state, made it an anathema for business. He sued Disney, put himself at war with Mickey Mouse and lost and got humiliated by them. What has he not done that was stupid politically? All for one purpose. He did the ad where he said God created a fighter to get evangelicals to love him. And he's going to finish maybe in the 15s, maybe in the 20s in Iowa. And he's finished as a politician in Florida as a result.
Also, I really appreciated her going through and taking the time on Monday night to say, here are all the things that he did and how corrupt it is. And by the way, we didn't have this in our news roundup, but there was a special election in Florida this week, and the Democrat won. And one person I saw on social media had a Republican come to their door asking for a vote in that special election. And she asked the door knocker, is your candidate a Republican? And he said, yes. And she said, I can't vote for Republicans because of how your party is behaving. And the door knocker said, well, I have to give you that. And walked away. And it's not just the chairman trying to blackmail the party with his 3 ways and his filming his own sexual assaults and then refusing to resign until they paid him $2 million. It's not just that. It's DeSantis. It's Trump. It's all of it.
It's the whole party. It's Stefanik.
The whole party.
It's Lindsey Graham. It's the whole party. It's
the whole party.
It's Marco Rubio endorsing Donald Trump.
It's time to simply say, you don't have to get in a fight with anybody, but you can say voting Republican is contrary to my moral values.
Yeah. Well, you can say that. I can say that. The New York Times can't say that.
No, they can't. That's right. But they patted themselves on the back for that editorial.
They did.
Because they were so bold, Driftglass.
So bold.
We have a beautiful letter from AJ. We get such beautiful postcards and letters, and got a hand-drawn card this week with balloons on it. It was actually artwork. So beautiful. This is from AJ. I've been one of your listeners since episode 1. And before that, a resolute follower and occasional commenter on both of your wonderful blogs. He's old school, AJ.
Yeah.
During the dark Bush days, even through the even darker TFG days, sorry, he must not be named, and through the darkest 12 days of Christmas 2020, your view from the cornfield made a difference to me. And while you both deserve to be the Democratic spokespeople we see nightly on TV or read daily in our national and regional media, your forthright and critically authentic observations of contemporary American politics disqualifies you from appearing on any sort of corporate media platform. I wish I could tell you how many times I shared your language, your rhetorical frameworks, and your own words with friends and family who are equally depressed by contemporary politics. Well, I'm depressed by contemporary politics too.
We all are.
So appreciate you. How thankful I am that you continue to give us the lexicon needed to stay in this fight for what's right. It's a light shining through the darkness. Often you say that part of your mission is giving others the vocabulary they need to stand up and speak out. Mission accomplished.
Aw, thank you, AJ.
Thank you. As this growing majority becomes woke and activated, they need to quickly learn how to channel their anger, shame, and restless energy into positive action. Here again, you both deliver by frequently advocating for the small and important acts everyone can take. Postcards to voters. And I'm glad you mentioned that, AJ, because I was depressed this week and I did 5 postcards to voters for the Democrat who is running for George Santos's old seat. And I expect him to win. And that is how I turned my mood around. That is how I turned my despair around. And you know when I'm in despair because I go and grab some postcards to voters, get it to dig my way out. Also, concentration on local issues and politics and using positive and persuasive quips, useful to shutting up meatbags. Although not everyone can be a Johnny Cash, they can speak up like Cash did for what's right. And when they do, like the standing citizen of Rockwell's famous 4 Freedoms print, which we have hanging in our dining room, have to tell you. It was Driftglass's mother's.
Yep.
And she had it framed and in her dining room. And now we have it in our dining room. Yeah.
She was a Roosevelt Republican.
Was she a Roosevelt Republican?
Well, she couldn't vote. That was too young for that. But that was her. When Roosevelt died, she didn't know who else would be president.
Yeah.
Because she had been president her whole life at that point.
Yep.
And those are her values.
Yeah. Getting back to this, like the standing citizen of Rockwell's famous 4 Freedoms print, I believe collective little acts of power and agency will turn the tide towards happier days. That was beautifully put. As President Biden said in Valley Forge this year, quote, "We get up, we carry on, we never bow, we never bend, we speak of possibilities, not carnage. We're not weighed down by grievances. We don't foster fear. We don't walk around as victims. We take charge of our destiny. We get our job done with the help of people we find in America, who find their place in the changing world and dream and build a future that not only they, but all people deserve a shot at," unquote. If I didn't know better, his speechwriter is also a fan of your podcast, because indeed, the president's words truly describe what it means to be an American citizen. Let me close with my gratitude for your hard work, persistence, and inspiration. While it may be a small comfort when that next exorbitant medical copay comes along, you should know that what you are doing matters. It matters a lot.
Thank you, AJ.
And when I read this during our rehearsal, I got weepy. I'm glad I rehearsed it. It's very humbling, and thank you. Thank you very much for that letter.
Yes, it is.
Now, from the sublime to the ridiculous.
Yes. Shift gears.
We got a marketing opportunity from our podcast host, Buzzsprout. And we love Buzzsprout. They have been our podcast host since almost the very beginning. We've been with them for almost 14 years. And from time to time in the past year or so, they have offered us an opportunity to promote another Buzzsprout podcast on our show for money. And it's usually less than $20. So far, they've sent us 3, I think, possible crossover podcasts. But they sent us one this week, and it had an offer from a new podcast that only has 2 episodes out so far.
Yeah.
And you know, Driftglass, how much I love helping out new podcasters.
You do. You really do.
That is just one of my things. But then I noticed that this new podcast is by, and the host is MAGA Patriot in the Lion's Den.
Yeah. Yeah.
He has 2 whole episodes out, Driftglass.
Yeah, 2 whole and they're 16 hours each, I'm sure, you know.
You did a good impersonation of what you thought they might sound like.
Brother, I'm here in the lion's den. And let me tell you, things are rough out there. The communists are all over the place. Have you bought your supplements yet, brother? Have you?
That's it.
Yeah, and 16 hours of that.
He wants to be, either Alex Jones or Steve Bannon.
Yeah, somebody.
There's money in that, so.
There's always money there. There's always money. I can do that voice for an hour before my voice gives out. So we could do MAGA Patriot in the Tiger's Den. And,
If you have time to do that, we could do a 3rd podcast every week, but we're not going to. We don't have time.
My voice couldn't take it.
And your voice couldn't take it. My soul couldn't take it.
Yeah, I know. I can't do it. No.
So I wrote to Buzzsprout and imagine my surprise email. And they went, oh, yeah,
Yeah. Oopsie.
These go out by category. They're automated. And I said, I can tell they're automated because you have a typo in your template.
Yeah.
And then they wrote back to me again and say, oh, wow, you are fantastic for letting us know that. We're putting a $5 credit on your account, which is great. I mean, that shows you what kind of a business they are.
Yeah, that's an espresso-based beverage.
Yeah, that is. That's an espresso-based beverage for your humble podcasters that they gave us a credit because I said, look, I noticed your template has a misspelling. So that was obviously a typo.
But let's face it, this is the future, okay? This is going down to a binary choice for all of our listeners.
It's a binary choice between giving $5 to the professional left via Patreon.
Or MAGA Patriot in the lines that is the future if we don't get support from our listeners, okay?
We're not going to have ads from MAGA Patriot in the Lions.
I don't know. I think I might do some parody ads. I don't know. That sounds like fun.
Well, and maybe for our April 1st show, you could do an entire MAGA Patriot in the Tiger's Den podcast. That'd be pretty funny.
I'd have to do a lot of drinking before
2.5 minutes. No, yeah. I'm just thinking a 2.5 minute show.
I could do that. Do
you want to? Good luck to you, MAGA Patriot in the Lion's Den.
In all your future endeavors, yeah.
I want to see you convert your show to the Coffee Party podcast next March.
Yeah.
Or sooner.
Well, no, next December.
Next December
or January. Never supported Trump. Don't know who he is.
I'm an independent constitutional conservative.
That's right.
Never liked the tweeting.
What part of Florida are you from, MAGA Patriot? Yeah, I'm from the red part. Yeah, red and swollen and kind of creepy looking, like Trump's hands these days. So syphilis will do that to you. Anyway, moving on.
Driftglass, let's do a news roundup.
That sounds like fun. Let's start with Bill O'Reilly. Remember Bill O'Reilly? Barely anyone does out there, but he exists in the world, and he is outraged after a school district pulled his books under a Florida law he supported. He said it's absurd. Well, good for you, man. Conservative commentator Bill O'Reilly fumed against a Florida school district's decision to pull 2 of his books while officials determine whether they run afoul of a state law he supported. Hey, dumbass, look up Hoisted by Your Own Petard, okay?
Vivek is not MAGA.
Yeah.
Trump in his Truth Social account turned on, quote, deceitful, unquote, Ramaswamy right before the Iowa caucus. And then Vivek lost and dropped out of the race and endorsed Trump. And someone had the, wherewithal to ask Vivek about this. And Vivek meekly noted that it was probably Team B, some drone worker,
right,
writing that on Truth Social, not Trump himself.
Yeah,
you wish, Vivek.
Yeah, he's MAGA, all right. He will drop to his knees when Donald says yes. That makes you MAGA. Yep. Speaking of which, Marco Rubio endorsed Donald Trump right before the Iowa caucuses. Quote, "It's time to get on with the work of beating Biden and saving America." This is the same Marco Rubio who said in 2016, "You all have friends that are thinking about voting for Donald Trump. Friends don't let friends vote for con artists," unquote. This was the savior of the Republican Party back in 2016. He was going to be the one.
It's going to be Rubio. It's going to be Rubio.
That's David Brooks on Meet the Press. And that's the cover of Time magazine, I believe.
Yep.
You know what? And you know what, Blue Gal? We were kind of on to him before.
Way before even Jon Stewart was on to him.
Would you do me a favor?
Even before Chris Christie was on to him, I was saying He's dumb as toast. He's not bright. He has been brought on for looks, and that's it. And he has the right policies.
And when he got tripped up, I think on the Colbert Report, he ran through both sides, 37 times in like a minute. He got completely caught in a loop, and he couldn't say anything, but both sides are to blame. By the way, Blue Gal, do you have a button that makes a sound that might represent our feeling about Marco Rubio at this exact time, that about being right all the time and how what a burden that is? Thank you, Blue Gal.
So the Biden campaign is grappling with a stubborn reality, Driftglass.
Yeah.
The majority of undecided voters, this is according to their internal campaign research, their internal polling, the majority of undecided voters simply do not seem to believe, at least not yet, that Donald Trump is likely to be the GOP nominee. And what was it that somebody said on the 11th hour? It was going to be cholesterol or the courts that was going to stop Donald Trump. And there was going to be some miracle that would happen that would make him not be the GOP nominee.
The magic hamburger. No, he's not going to be Trump. No, we're not going to do Trump Biden again. No, that's not going to happen. No.
Yeah.
And these are people who believe they are informed enough to have that opinion.
Yeah.
This week, Nikki Haley got in touch with her inner Michelle Bachmann. We have never been a racist country. Yeah. Remember when Michelle Bachmann went on and on about how the founding fathers worked tirelessly
to end slavery.
Slavery was no more. And everyone looked at themselves and said, is she this stupid? Really? Yeah, she really is.
But she was an idiot, Driftglass.
Well, that's the difference. Michelle Bachmann is an idiot, and Nikki Haley goddamn well knows better.
She knows better, but she also knows her party.
She's running as a Republican. You got to say crazy shit like this to win, to come in second place in the Republican Party.
Yeah. Here's some more Haley bullshit. When asked by CNN's Dana Bash, how do you feel about your party's frontrunner being held liable for sexual abuse, Haley answered, I haven't paid attention to his cases, and I'm not a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, but you got investigations on Trump and Biden.
The magic phrase.
Both sides did.
Sure.
And I want to say something in defense of Dana Bash, which I never do.
Right.
People were hard on her because she didn't push back hard enough on, I'm not a lawyer. And she said, he's innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
And the thing is that he's been found accountable by a jury for sexual assault.
Yes, he has.
And, but Dana Bash did say that in her question, very specifically said, you are the only woman running. As a woman, how do you feel about the party's frontrunner being held liable for sexual abuse? And then she stopped and let Haley answer the question. So she was not covering up and saying, the controversy over E. Jean Carroll. She didn't phrase it that way.
She didn't call her an accuser. No, nothing like that.
No, nothing like that. She made the point. Dana Bash made the point. The frontrunner has been held liable for sexual abuse. Yep. And that is how I would have put it. And, getting confrontational with her beyond that is something that you and I would have done, Driftglass.
In a minute.
But as a CNN reporter, Dana Bash, in that particular instance, did her job. I have to say.
Yeah. Well, and the reaction, everywhere but the Republican primaries was, Jesus Christ, this woman has
really
gutless.
This is gutless.
Cowardly
this is gutless.
Bullshit.
To say both sides are being investigated. Fuck you.
Yeah. Another great American newspaper is swallowed up by the fascists.
Mm-hmm.
It's a trend. In a tense 3-hour meeting, the New Baltimore Sun owner, David Smith, told employees he has only read the paper 4 times in the past few months. He insulted the quality of their journalism and encouraged them to emulate a TV station his broadcasting company owns, which I believe is a Sinclair station.
Yeah.
It's a right-wing propaganda sump pump, and you should be more like that. So, Baltimore Sun is a storied paper, a legendary paper, a great newspaper. I don't subscribe, but I remember when Murdoch took over the Sun-Times in Chicago, and Mike Royko walked across the street and said, I'd rather work for the Republicans than work for this son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got to be a court case, and, there was lawsuits, and it got tossed around. But it's just incredibly depressing to see, in a time when the New York Times is just hiding under a desk, praying for the world to change. and lying to its readers. And we desperately need a free and fair press, a fearless free and fair press, to attack the fascists like David Smith. They're just buying shit up and turning it to their advantage. Everybody from Elon Musk buying Twitter to this asshole buying the Baltimore Sun.
Yeah,
it's a
and
bunch
I thought
of
a lot about that Elon Musk bought Twitter to destroy it.
Yeah.
Because it was the place where journalists were contacting each other around the world.
Yeah, it was a sewer, but it had its purpose. It had its uses. I use it all the time.
And now it's been divided into 6 different websites where you can't keep track. Yeah. In another episode of Leopards Won't Eat My Face, reports of plagiarism against the academic Neri Oxman, wife of billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman, are accurate and well documented. The chief executive of Business Insider has told staff. Bill Ackman is the guy who was going to investigate all of the PhD dissertations out of Harvard and MIT to find plagiarism.
He's going to ferret that out. Well, ferreting begins at home there, Bill. So,
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, he's not mad at his wife for making him look like a fool. He's mad that someone found out and made him look like a fool. And he's going to go after the people that found out that his wife is as big a plagiarist as anybody he's been accusing of plagiarism. And he's going to take them down because he has a lot of money. And that's really all that matters. Breaking news, Donald Trump's attorney, Joseph Tacopina, also known as Taco Penis. Say it again, Taco Penis.
Taco Penis.
We're not going to have Taco Penis kick around anymore because Taco Penis has just dropped Donald Trump as a client for his Manhattan criminal case and the E. Jean Carroll appeal. We shall never see his like again.
I bet you will see him again.
Yeah.
We're also not going to, we don't have Asa Hutchinson to kick around anymore.
Remember Asa Hutchinson?
Yeah, except we'll be able to kick him around every Sunday on Meet the Press.
Yeah. Yeah. He's our generation's T-Paw, honey. He's our Tim
T-Paw.
Pawlenty.
Trump won the Iowa Republican caucuses by, we have to admit, an unprecedented margin, given the turnout. He defeated Ron DeSantis by some 30 points. About 31 minutes after caucusing began, networks declared Trump the winner. Trump facing 91 charges across 4 criminal cases. And don't forget, he has been found liable for sexual assault by a jury.
Yes, he has.
But he won 98 of 99 counties in Iowa in the Iowa Republican caucus.
Yeah. That's what we're up against.
As I said in my post that night, screw Iowa Republicans.
Yeah. Well, again, as you pointed out, between them and New Hampshire have 10 electoral votes. So
yeah, they have 10. They have
a
6.
rounding error.
They have 6, and New Hampshire has 4. Yep.
They're goddamn right. So the Biden administration demanded that Texas stop blocking federal border patrol agents from accessing a section of the U.S. southern border after a woman and 2 children drowned in the Rio Grande. Texas has announced they will not obey the order, for which I have 2 words: federal troops.
Amen.
High time to bring that situation in Texas under federal control.
Trump defied the judge presiding over his $370 million civil fraud trial. And by the way, the Trump organization has been found criminally responsible for fraud. And Trump delivered a brief courtroom speech claiming that he's an innocent man and that the lawsuit brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James is a fraud on me.
Yeah, we were talking about Alina Habba and what a staggeringly
she had a bad
person.
court thingy today.
And it's so bad, it makes me wonder, is she play acting being that bad to give Trump a grounds for appeal on incompetence of counsel? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. But when the judge has to interrupt her and say, basically, did I fucking stutter? I just told you not to do that. And threaten to, haul Trump out of court.
Yeah.
And
we're going to take a break so you can refresh the rules about entering evidence into this court. Yeah.
And she objects to something, it's overruled, and she goes right back to it, introducing irrelevant bullshit. And all the while, the judge is desperately trying not to, drag her ass into a cell and put her in contempt of court, because that would be exactly what Trump would want. But she is really just, all the TV lawyers are just looking at each other like, did she drink a lot of gasoline as a child? Was she dropped on her head repeatedly? Because she's clearly a fucking idiot.
No, and the judge did say, literally, quote, "Did you hear what I said?" When the judge says, "Did you hear what I said?"
Uh-huh.
And then at one point she said, "I don't like being spoken to that way." To the judge?
How dare you judge me? Okay, well, we're done here. But she goes back to, her rabbit hutch, and Donald Trump gives her a treat for being a good lawyer.
Yep.
Get up there and be an asshole.
Her firm's made $2.4 million and has actually been paid for that, apparently.
Well, like any good hooker, get the money up front. Get the money up front. Congressional leaders agreed on a short-term funding bill to avert a partial government shutdown, which you'd think is pretty good. The House, however, canceled votes on the spending bill due to a winter storm, despite several agencies and government functions set to run out of funding on Friday, which is tomorrow.
Ron DeSantis at a town hall in New Hampshire this week said, quote, "Every booster you take, you're more likely to get COVID as a result of it."
Yeah.
Does he want his voters to die?
I think he's just mad at them for not voting for him. So take as many out as possible.
Wow.
He's a troubled young man. Perhaps boarding school or military school will straighten him out.
J.B. Pritzker had a big week in local news, being a Biden surrogate in Iowa and celebrating a $500 million German investment in a manufacturing plant in Alton, Illinois. Boy, he was ready to pop a button at that meeting.
It was wonderful. I mean, that really was my wheelhouse. It was manufacturing. It was investing in the workforce. It was getting foreign investment. It was a good company. And it was a public-private partnership. And I'm like,
And they do copper rolling, and they do, there's something about copper and batteries and stuff that it's very essential to electric vehicles and electric batteries and so forth. So this is, one of the industries of the future in a company and a plant that's been around for quite a while. And all of a sudden there's a use for their copper that is new and innovative. And so really they're investing $500 million in this one plant.
Yeah, and it's the factory's been around for 100 years, I believe, and it's like 1,200 jobs.
And the company is called Wieland,
uh-huh.
and it's a German company. But boy, Pritzker was there, giving a little speech, and our future couldn't be brighter, Driftglass.
Oh, you should know that Olive has arrived, just in time for me to do the Internet Kitty, which is good timing, Olive.
Yeah, and Driftglass gets to do the Internet Kitty today.
I'm petting Olive with one hand so Olive won't stomp across my computer and ruin our podcast. So hang in there, Olive. Just a few more minutes. Quote, this is from Dateline WCIA in Springfield. Decatur native Chad McIntyre says it can get lonely on the road as a truck driver, which is a sentence that often ends very badly. But this one ends ends differently. Going around the country without anyone at your side. That's why he started bringing his family's cat Tyler along for the rides. He'd been a great companion for a little over a month that I had him on the truck, McIntyre said. He's a very well-traveled cat. He's been in, I would say, 20 of the 48 lower states anyway. In November, the pair pulled up to a truck stop in Fernley, Nevada, unquote. Long story short, the cat ran away into the desert of Fernley, Nevada, and Chad couldn't find him. When he got back to Decatur, he put the word out that Tyler was lost. By some miracle, 5 days later, I think this is all Facebook-based, they got a call that Tyler was safe in an animal shelter, but in a place that they'd never heard of, Rock Springs, Wyoming, which is 670 miles away from the Nevada truck stop where he went missing. Chad talked about driving back west to get Tyler, but weather was terrible, and his wife said no. But Good Samaritans traveling east made a relay of it. They drove Tyler a little ways, then handed him off to the next person, and so on until Tyler was home, safe and sound.
Oh, my goodness. Mm-hmm. In the Decatur area. And so we, this week, decided that Tyler would be Internet Kitty of the Week. And he looks like such a happy cat.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, we're positive that Tyler eats freshly poured cat food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve Pet Store Perfection or Dollar Store Dreck, your cat will hitch rides across the country just to get back to that kitchen where they can demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured.
Freshly poured, oh my Lord, it's freshly poured.
And I have a little story about Olive, too. We always give cats a bribe before we podcast to calm them down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave the cats treats before we did. And then I went over to pour my coffee, and just out of, walking around, I'm pouring my coffee and I start singing the freshly poured song. And Olive, who was eating the treats that I'd just given him, heard the song and ran over to my legs and said, "Oh, you've got freshly poured? Where is it?"
It works.
It's in your bowl. No, that was 3 seconds ago.
Pavlov was right, honey. Pavlov was right.
Pavlov was right. And you can visit Tyler at our Facebook page and website. You can send your internet kitty, dog, or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, where you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions! Letter on the air unless you say otherwise.
Do not forget our gourmet coffee guidelines. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job. Right, Olive? That's right, Driftglass. If you can spare $5 a month, please spare $5 a month at patreon.com/proleftpod. Please share our show on social media, and if you love this podcast, give it to someone you care about and make them listen to. I don't care how you do it. Strap them down, get them in a car, drive them to Wyoming, whatever you got to do. And thank you very much for doing that.
Hey, Driftglass, how are the internet kitties doing this week?
Well, Blue Gal, the internet kitties think Tyler the cat should have stayed in Wyoming and run for the Congress against the awful Harriet Hageman.
Yeah, Tyler would be a better congressperson than Harriet.
Literally any vertebrate would be a better congressperson than Harriet Hageman.
Let's think about living.
Think about living.
Just think about loving.
Think about loving.
Just think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the loving, loving, loving. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with the switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2024-25, GGBG Productions.